This message is for my friends in Israel. It's a story about an 11-year-old girl. Years ago, this girl and her family traveled to Israel. One of the last stops on their trip was Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem commemorates one of the darkest parts of human history, the Holocaust. It sits high up on Mount Herzl, often called the Mount of Remembrance, and it stands for the Jewish people killed in the Holocaust who had no descendants to carry on their name. It's pretty heavy for any kid, much less an 11-year-old girl, and her parents weren't sure if she was ready for it, but they wanted her to understand the importance of standing up against evil, so they decided to bring her. The girl's father promised to stay with her throughout the entire time they were in the museum. If he said it became too much, he'd simply take her outside. As they walked through Yad Vashem, the girl watched videos of entire families being marched to their deaths. She saw the hundreds of shoes taken right off of the feet of Jewish children her own age and piled high to be burned. She listened as the names of the 1.5 million Jewish children murdered by the Nazis were read off one by one, and was told it takes months to get through the full list. The 11-year-old girl didn't speak at all as she walked through each of the exhibits. She gripped her father's hand tighter and tighter. He worried that they'd made a mistake, that it was too much for her to take in and to wrap her head around. But eventually they got to the end of the museum, where there was a guest book for visitors to sign. The girl reached up and took a pen out of the father's shirt pocket, and he looked over her shoulder. The father watched as his daughter wrote down her name and her address, and then in careful handwriting, the little girl paused and wrote, "Why didn't somebody do something?" Tears welled in the father's eyes, and in that moment, he knew that she got it. Very simply, why didn't somebody do something? He knew that his daughter understood. He knew that she understood that all it takes for evil to win is for good people to stand by and do nothing. I know this story and the impact it had because I was that girl. In the ongoing battle between good and evil, each of us can do something. And I know each of you will. I certainly know the American people will. And we will stand with you. Together, we will stand against evil, and we will never apologize for it. With God as our witness, we know how this story ends. The enemy will be defeated, and good will prevail.
Jara and I were at a dinner party, and Sarah shared that story. And you can see how, just like the hiding place shaped me, Yad Vashem, if you've been there, unbelievably powerful. To walk through, and I mean, it takes a couple, 3 hours to walk through and to see the horrors of what took place. It's incomprehensible. The pile of shoes of little kids, those names being read off, it's powerful. And you say, well, that happened a long time ago. That's like history. Things like that wouldn't happen. We're too civilized for the people to create genocide and try and wipe people out and that level of hatred. This couple in their 30s, just turned 30, have 2 children. Itai and Hadar got married in Israel, planned to have a wonderful life, planned to have a family, 2 children, 2 sons, twins, 10 months old. And last Saturday, when a group of terrorists attack Israel in a planned, coordinated, ruthless way and kill 1,000 Jews, they end up knocking on their door, beating the door down, them trying to sort that out. Imagine what that would be like for you. And them hiding their 2 sons. just in time as they broke through the door, and the two of them fought the terrorist as best they could until they were both murdered. The two boys that they'd hid were alone for 10 hours, dehydrated, would surely have died, except some IDF guys came by and found them. And one of the most powerful pictures I saw all weekend was one of the IDF soldiers giving a bottle to one of the kids and trying to help them, get hydrated. This is real. This isn't fake. This is what hatred, this is what anti-Semitism, this is what an ideology in the world, a theology in the world. How many of you have ever heard all religions believe the same thing? Really? When somebody says that to you, you don't have to say it out loud, but you should think, maybe you say it. Are you totally detached from reality? Are you like so incompetent that you can't look through history? Maybe they don't know history. Maybe we're ignorant. But there's an ideology that hates the Jewish people, that hates Jesus, hates what Jesus creates, hates a biblical worldview. If you don't believe it, Iran declares victory after the Palestinian proxy slaughters hundreds of Israelis, 1,300 of them. Oh, they only killed soldiers. Of 1,300, 265 were soldiers. They're going house to house chopping little kids up. They were commanded, every woman was supposed to be abused before she is killed. This is heinous. This is wicked. You say, well, that's far away. Well, law enforcement from around the world has heightened. 33,000 officers in New York City alone were called up this weekend because they weren't sure what was going to happen. Ask the Jewish people in New York who said this weekend they were being hunted. Look at what happened yesterday in London when thousands of people were walking down the street and they're crying out, "We will find the Jews, we want their blood." Or in Berlin last night as people were going around and putting the Star of David on people's houses if they were Jewish. Henry Kissinger is right. Some of you might know him from the past. He was a key statesman here in the United States back in the 70s during the Yom Kippur War and so forth. He said Europe risks a similar attack. See, it's not just Israel, but Europe, Paris, London, Germany now has, and if you read down through his statements, have so many people with a different culture and a different theology, that's how we would say it, or a different religion, a different worldview, that they're in danger of the same exact thing. And that's true of the United States. And if you don't believe it, just University of Minnesota, Hamas terror, that's their only option. Or University of Wisconsin, glory to the martyrs. This last couple of years, Kendall Qualls, from Take Charge, the two of us have been warning about Black Lives Matter. And why have we been warning? Because they have an ideology that's not only Marxist, but it is anti-biblical. Right in their statement of faith. Kindle has it, I have it on file, they've taken it down, but right on their webpage, the nuclear family is oppressive and evil. Really? God said it's good, He created it. Right on their webpage, they support a sexuality that God calls an abomination. And for someone to say that, according to them, that's a human rights violation. And then this week, people are shocked when they support Hamas and the Palestinian movement to eradicate the Jews. Shouldn't be a shock, friend, when you have a worldview that is anti-God, what God states, it shouldn't be surprised that if you're on the other team. So thankful for Kendall and others who have stood up in this day and given a moral compass to even people who didn't want to hear it. 2 years ago, when the Pew Research Group did their poll, 67% of Americans supported Black Lives Matter. As of just a few months ago, 51%. As of last week, it's declining and people are shocked. It's a different worldview than what the Bible describes. You say, well, this is America. Things like this don't happen in America. Well, here's some students being held at bay, and I just want you to see what they're saying. I want you to see the enthusiasm. It's terrifying. Watch this. Holding up your phone, dead Israelis. That's your boy, and then flipping everybody off. This is dangerous. And then you celebrate and say you support cowards like this that hide behind babies. This is evil. Real men protect babies. Real men don't kill babies. Real men don't go and surround themselves with children. And so that way, when the IDF comes, they can get on CNN and say, oh, see, the Jews are killing children. These people are a bunch of cowards. They are evil and they are wicked. And friends, I just want to give you one thought today, and that's this. You need to own it. This is your moment in history. You know, when we read history, we find people, men and women, who are in difficult circumstances. Why? Because you live in a sinful world. I live in a sinful world, every generation. That's why we're looking for a new heavens, a new earth where righteousness dwells. But between now and then, we look through history to find men and women who did noble things, just things, godly things, who rose to the occasion and did something heroic, not just so you can read history, but so that you and I can look at them and say, man, that's the kind of person I want to be when the chips are down. That's the kind of person I want to be when people are butchering the Jews or people are doing this evil or this atrocity. We need examples to follow. That's what history does. It shows us how good people act and how bad people or passive people act. You know, in college campuses right now, in Christian circles, it's really cool to read Bonhoeffer. He wrote they call it a modern classic now. It's called The Cost of Discipleship. 1933, he stood up in Germany. He was a German Lutheran pastor. He stood up and he said, hey, all of you Lutherans out there know that you should not join the cult of the Fuhrer. And all of a sudden, the radio program dropped off the air. Why? They censored him. They ended up throwing him into a concentration camp. They ended up hanging him before it was all said and done. And people read about him and say, wow, if the chips were down, I mean, that guy did something noble, good, just at that moment, right, in history. The question is, will we own it in this moment in history and do something similar? Or again, like Casper ten Boom, who said to his family, we can't just sit in our house here and be passive while the Nazis kill all the Jews around us. And they saved 800. One family willing to do something different, and it's attributed that by God's grace, in the name of Jesus, they helped 800 Jews. Do you think God was well pleased with that? Yeah. There's a story in the Bible, as I was thinking this week and seeing all this unfold, it reminded me of the Yom Kippur War, and there's a whole history lesson we need there, but it reminded me when the Day of Rage came out, when they made that announcement Thursday, like globally, we're going to have this Day of Rage against the Jews and support Hamas and so forth. A day when, quite honestly, we want to see and celebrate the killing of Jews. It reminded me of the story of Esther. If you've grown up around church, you probably heard the story about Queen Esther.